Shalom, friends. Welcome to this fourth installment of our series of the lessons that we're learning about in Sefirat HaOmer. We're learning about a Kabbalistic journey into the world of self-refinement. The Shiurim are going to pick up even more so and get even deeper and deeper. So I hope that you will continue to follow me throughout all these different lessons that we're doing. What we're basically doing is we're working through the Sefer, which is called U'Sefartem Lachem, and you shall count for yourselves, written by Rabbi Daniel Frisch, great tzaddik and Mekubal, great Kabbalist, died in 2005, known as the Baal Matok Midvash. He wrote an entire commentary on the Zohar, and all of his works that he does is all about the mystical side of the revealed side of the Torah. So we're learning about Sefirat HaOmer in a revealed sense, and then further to that, we're going in slightly deeper to look at the deeper side of how we can understand what's going on behind the scenes as to how we can improve ourselves. So this is the fourth installment. In the previous lesson, we quoted a number of beautiful chapters, sections in the Zohar HaKadosh, and we also quoted a fantastic section from the Chesed LaAvraham, written by Rabbi Avraham Azulai, the great tzaddik, and also a great Kabbalist responsible for numerous teachings that we have today. So the chapter that we're doing today in this work is called Ma'alat U'Kedushat Yemei HaOmer, the greatness and the holiness of the days of the Omer. That's what it's all about. These are days of holiness. He says, Katav b'Sefer Arvei Nachal. It's written in this book called the Arvei Nachal, written by a very great Hasidic Rebbe. And it's a work on Chassidut, on Kabbalah. He was an outstanding giant, the rabbi involved in this particular work. He was an outstanding giant in both the revealed Torah and the hidden Torah. And he says the following, in that we learned in the previous lesson, he says everything that's mentioned in the book Chesed LaAvraham, that we learned before, that in 400 consecutive days, a person can completely lose out on his sense of free choice. That means to say, when a person engages in a particular routine on the side of holiness or on the side of unholiness for a period of 400 days, he can completely lose his free choice and ends up doing that particular thing for the rest of his life. Let's give an example. Again, as we said before in the previous Shear, it's kind of like a person who takes a cigarette. He has one cigarette and he says it's nice. He has another cigarette, it's also pretty good. But anyway, after a certain amount of cigarettes, he starts to think to himself that he can't really get off this habit. And he seems to feel that he needs to have 4 cigarettes a day, 5 cigarettes a day, a box of cigarettes a day, and so on and so forth. And the alcoholic feels no different. He begins with 1 drink, and then he feels he can have 2 drinks another day. And before long, after a few drinks, he's totally addicted to the alcohol, and he seems that as if he can't kill himself with this habit. Well, according to what the Sefer Arvei Nachal says regarding the teaching of the Chesed LaAvraham, regarding that if a person engages in a particular habit of either holiness or unholiness for a period of 400 days, he will not be able to return and have free choice again in that particular direction. If he does good for 400 days, he will be hooked into the world of purity, of Kedusha and Tahara, of holiness and purity. If he engages in activities for 400 days in the world of impurity, he will be hooked into the world of impurity and he will be unable to get himself out of this. He says this is specifically with other days of the year. He says because how it works is when we spoke about the 50 different gates of purity or the 50 gates of impurity, whichever one that we're talking about, he says during this period of time, each gate can be acquired in the period of 8 days. 8 days times 50 gates of purity or impurity equals 400, which means to say that 8 days that go by are the equivalent of the growth of one particular gate. When a person engages in a particular activity, whether it's pure or impure, for a period of 8 days, he begins to acquire that particular gate. If it's pure, he acquires the gate of purity. If it's impure, he acquires the gate of impurity. When he moves himself through a period of 400 days, he works through 50 gates of either purity or impurity, And then, as a result of that, he acquires the level of purity or impurity. He can't get himself away from it. He no longer has any free choice. Amnam, however, B'mei HaOmer, says the Rav in the Sefer Arvei Nachal, he says that when it comes to the days of the Omer, Ha'elu, efshar lahasik b'chol yom shar shalem, a person is able to acquire one complete gate on each day of the counting of the Omer, 49 days of counting, a total of 50 days between Pesach and Shavuot. A person can acquire what would generally take him 8 days to do. He acquires it in 1 day. If he works through the particular day in the correct manner, he works on himself spiritually, and he grows with what he needs to do, becomes an effort. He internalizes it. Then what we say is he acquires in 1 day what generally would take him 8 days. Okay. Bein biyitzia misharei hatuma, whether it is the exit from gates of impurity, or bein ba'asagas sharei kedusha, or whether it is in acquiring the gates of purity. Remember what we said before, our goal is if a person is working on himself correctly, if he wants delight, if he wants to progress, he wants in his life what's called kedusha v'tara, holiness and purity. If he's going towards that goal, these are the ideal days in which every day gives him the opportunity to do particular activities to acquire the gate on that particular day. And that's the goal. Nimtza, consequently we find, sheyesh b'chol yom mimei ha'omer koach shel shmona yamim. Therefore, we find that on each day of the Omer, it has the power of 8 days. Katava Rambam. And now we're going to read what the Rambam says. Let us take a look. Now remember, when the Ramban wrote his commentary, the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, that great tzaddik who lived from 1194 to 1270, was 76 years old when he died, approximately. And he comes from Spain. He made his way eventually to Israel, and this is where he died, in the land of Israel. The Ramban was a great tzaddik. He was a doctor, and he was a master Kabbalist as well. In fact, he was really the last of the great Kabbalists to live, who possessed the original direct transmission of the Kabbalistic tradition. This is the Ramban that we're speaking about now. Okay, so we're reading from the teachings of the Ramban, and the Ramban's commentary is not an easy commentary by any means to get through. It is based on many Kabbalistic ideas. So let's be patient with the words, but we're going to learn something wonderful from it. Let's first take a look at the Chumash itself. The Chumash itself says in the book of Vayikra, chapter 23, and we're looking at verse 34, where God is talking to Moshe, and he says to him, Daber el bnei Yisrael lemor, b'chamisha asa yom lachodesh hashvi'i hazeh, chag hasukot, shivat yamim ladonoi. He says, speak to the children of Israel and say, on the 15th day of the 7th month, this is the festival of Sukkot. It's for 7 days to be for Hashem. Well, I thought that we were talking about Pesach and Shavuot. What are we talking about here on Sukkot all of a sudden? No, I'm not bringing up the incorrect quote over here. We're bringing up the correct quote to understand what Shavuot is through a comparison to the festival of Sukkot. Bayom HaRishon Mikra Kodesh. Now, on the first day, it's called holy. You may not do any work. The pasuk continues. Listen to this beautiful pasuk. Shivas yamim takrivu ishe ladonoi bayom hashmini mikra kodesh yeh lachem vikravtem ishe ladonoi atzeres hi kol meleches avodah lo ta'asu. For 7 days you shall bring a fire offering to Hashem, and on the 8th day it's a day that's called holy day. It shall be for you, and you shall bring a fire offering to Hashem. It's atzeret, all work of a nature of melechet avodah, which means constructive work, a type of work which is related to a Torah definition of particular activities that were performed in the Mishkan. There were 39 activities that were performed. We may not engage in those 39 constructive activities, whatever the exact translation is. The idea is, of course, when we speak about melacha, we're not speaking about whether we can lift up some furniture which is heavy. We're speaking about an action which may not be done because it is prohibited, because of the fact that that particular action was done in the Mishkan. So we say that called melechet avodah, any type of purposeful work, which means that it relates to the Mishkan, that type of work. you may not do it. You may pick up her furniture if you wish to, even if it's very heavy. But don't carry out a pin in your pocket when you walk out your home, because that will be considered the malacha of carrying outside from one domain to another, which is prohibited, carrying in a public thoroughfare, etc. This is forbidden. You carry your tissue inside your pocket, and you are over on an aveira of malacha on Shabbos. Even though it doesn't take much to carry the tissue, yet if you lift up your furniture and move it across the room from one side to the other, this is not considered to be malacha. Of course, you shouldn't do it in any case, keeping within the spiritual atmosphere of Shabbos and Yom Tov, but you're not actually transgressing any aveira. Okay, let us continue. Now, according to this, the word that is used over here is atzeret. Atzeret means that there's a day of stopping. If you're in Israel and you go on the buses, you'll notice that when you push the button to tell the bus driver to stop the bus, you'll see that it says there atzor. The word atzor means stop. You're instructing the bus driver, please stop at the next stop. You ring the bell, but it says atzor, and atzor means stop. Atzeret therefore means it is a day of stopping, and you may not engage in any type of this purposeful, constructive work which was done in the Mishkan. Okay. What in the world does this have to do with the festival of Shavuot? Oh, interesting. Good question. Now, let us look at what the Ramban says. The Ramban says, Atzeret hi. It is a day of stopping. Atzarti etchem lefanai. I've stopped you before me. Kamelech, like a king. Shezimenet panav lesuuda, lekach vekach yamim. This is the story. There was a king, and he invited his children to a meal, a festive meal, for such and such an amount of days. You know, like for example, on Sukkot, we have 7 days of Sukkot, and then we have Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah when we receive the Torah. 7 days is the festival of Sukkot, not 8 days. And the 8th day is a special day all to itself. So we see over here that the king invited over everybody to his special meal, a Suda, and it's going to last a certain amount of days. Keivan she'igiyas manan lipater, famous Rashi, we're actually reading what Rashi says. The Ramban is really quoting what Rashi says. And he says over here, since the time comes for everybody to depart, Omer, the king said, Bevakasha mikem. He's talking to the people at the Seudah, and he says, once all the main people have left, and there's certain people that remain behind, he talks to them and he says, you people, please, he says to them, Akvui mi od yom echad. Please stay with me for 1 extra day. Because your departure from me is a very difficult thing. The king is talking to a group of people, and he's got his select people who are part of the meal, and then he's got everybody else. So everybody's invited to the special meal that lasts a certain amount of days. At the end of the period, everybody leaves, and he stops this group of people who are very special to him, and he says, please, do not leave the meal. Stay by me for another day, where I can be with you alone. This is the idea of Shmini Atzeret. After 7 days, where the Jewish people are involved in all sorts of festive activities, also involved in offering offerings for the nations of the world, because indeed the offerings that were offered were to bring blessing to the nations of the world as well. So therefore, when the 7 days are up and all the offerings have been offered, even for the nations of the world, then Hashem turns to the Jewish people and he says to them, please stop a moment and be with me on this day all by ourselves, like a husband and a wife together in unison, together in unity, in intimacy. This is what Rashi said. This is what the Ramban said. And he brings it down. He says this Agada, the story is brought in Vayikra Rabbah. But according to the true way of understanding it, I'm going to teach you something different, says the Ramban. That God made the world in 6 days. He made the heavens and the earth. And then he said that on the 7th day is the day of Shabbos, and Shabbos does not have a partner. Why does Shabbos not have a partner? Because you see there are 6 days, and therefore the first day corresponds to the 4th day, the second day corresponds to the 5th day, and the third day corresponds to the 6th day. If we look at the different things that were created on those days, we will notice on the first day corresponding to the 4th day, second to the 5th, and the third to the 6th. But when Shabbos was created, Shabbos has no partner. Knesset Israel hipasugo. And therefore what? The Knesset Israel, the congregation of the Jewish people, that is the partner for Shabbat. How do we know that? Because the pasuk says, "Ve'et haaretz, et hashamayim, ve'et haaretz." The shamayim, that refers to everything else going on, and the aretz, that refers to the Jewish people exclusively, the malchut, the shekhinah, the Jewish people. V'ina hishminit. Now, this is considered to be the 8th level that we're speaking about, as we just discussed. Atzereti, it's a day of, this 8th day that we're speaking about now, corresponding to the same idea, is a day of stopping. Why? Because on that day, everything stops. V'tziva b'chag hamatzot shiva yamim. And when we're talking about the festival of Pesach, known as Chag HaMatzot, it says that the festival of Pesach is for 7 days. First you have a day of holiness before, and then, in other words, it starts off with the day of holiness, and then it ends off afterwards with the day of holiness. All of them are holy, and Hashem is to be found in all of them. And we count a total of 49 days in the holy, so to speak, festival of Pesach, which only was for 7 days. Meaning that there are 49 days to this holy festival of Pesach, which is really only 7 days, but they're really 49 days. How did that work? Shiva Shavuot Kimei Olam. The 7 weeks are of the days of general days. The Kidesh Yom Shmini, and then the 8th day, which means to say that each week corresponds to a day. And then the 8th day is Kshmini Shel Chag, is really like the Shmini Atzeret of the festival of Sukkot. 7 weeks corresponding really to the 7 days of Sukkot. And then on the 8th day, which is really Shmini Atzeret, that's the day where Hashem says, stay with me, because your departure from me is a very hard thing. Please don't leave me. These are good days. These are times to be together. The king is together with his very special group of people who he's very close to, and when he sees that people are leaving him, and they're going to leave as well, it hurts him very much. He doesn't want to depart. He wants to stay with them. The festival must remain, and therefore he says, stay with me on that festival. When is that festival? This is the festival of Shavuot. The Kidesh Yom Shmini Kishmini Shel Chag, and therefore we see that he sanctified the 8th day like the 8th day of the festival. And the days that are between them are to be considered like Chol HaMoed. We discussed this already in the previous Shear. In other words, Chol HaMoed are the days that are in between the festival that are neither totally Kadosh and neither totally Chol. They're not completely of the nature of holiness, and they're not completely of the nature of secular profane. Rather, they contain both aspects, which means Pesach begins with holiness. Shavuot ends the holiness. The days in between are not just days of profanity. These are days of Chol HaMoed, which means to say what? We need to treat them with a certain measure of holiness, which means what? We need to work on ourselves correctly, to develop ourselves and to grow correctly. Okay. V'hu Yom Matan Torah, and this is the day on which the Torah was given. Shear Ambo etisho, that Hashem showed the Jewish people his fire, Hagdolah, the great fire, Udvarav Shamu mitoch ha'esh. And on that day of Shavuot, they heard God speaking through the fire. Ulekach yikru Rabboseinu zal b'chol makom Chag HaShavuot atzeret. And therefore it comes out that in every place that we see the idea of Shavuot mentioned in various places in the Torah, it is called by the name Atzeret, because Atzeret means to stop. Because Atzeret has a connection with Shmini Atzeret, which is the day that follows Sukkot. And now we understand what's happening. Ki hu kiyom Shmini shel Chag. This is like the 8th day of the festival, Shekurau HaKasuf Kain, and that's what the verse calls it. V'zeu ma'amaram, and this is what it says in the Gemara, Shmini regel bifnei atzmo hu le'inyan pazar kashav, and the 8th day is a festival to itself in the matter of Pazar Kashav. Pazar Kashav relate to certain things that relate to the mitzvahs of Shmini Atzeret, so we're not discussing that. That's for a Gemara Shiur. But Tashlumim Derishon Hu, and really what they are is really, and what it is, what the Shmini Atzeret is the completion really for the first day that began. Ki hu atzilut harishonim ve'enu ka'aktus shelahim, and it's like the atzilut, it's like the emanation from what comes off from the first things, and it's not that it's united with them. Ulekach yazkin b'parshas kol ha'bechor, and therefore, when we mention in the Parsha of Kol HaBechor, B'Shalosh Regalim, that there are three festivals, Chag HaMatzot, V'Chag HaShavuot, V'Chag HaSukkot, Shivat Yamim, there it says that there are 7 days. V'lo yazkir hashmini, but it doesn't mention the 8th day. Ki sham Omar, because there it says, Yeira'eh kol zechurecha, and there it says, and there shall appear before him, meaning before Hashem, all of your males, meaning all men are required to go up to the Beit HaMikdash and to offer their offerings and to be seen at the Beit HaMikdash on these particular days. This is explained. What is the Rambam teaching us? The Rambam is teaching us that the day of Shavuot is actually connected to Pesach, very much like the day of Shmini Atzeret is connected to Sukkot. But the thing is that Shmini Atzeret is a festival to itself, even though it's connected to Sukkot, just as Shavuot is a festival to itself, even though it's connected to Pesach. What we need to do is to take the light that shines from the festival of Sukkot, bring it into Shmini Atzeret, and turn that into its festive day as it should be. But the 2 days are connected, even though they are separated. They are not united in the fact that Shmini Atzeret is actually Sukkot, but nevertheless it has an emanation of the light of Sukkot, which is exclusive for the Jewish people and not for anybody else. So too, when it comes to Pesach to Shavuot, we likewise have the same concept. Pesach to Shavuot is really a connection of the 49 days between, which brings the holiness of the Pesach, connects to Shavuot, and then brings the holiness into Shavuot itself, and brings us to a higher level. This is the basic theme of what we're learning about, the holiness of the 49 days. The 49 days are to be considered as a Chol HaMoed. Okay. Chasav Rabbeinu HaRashash, he writes over here that the Rashash, the great Kabbalist in the 18th century, who revealed to us further teachings of the Holy Arizal and brought into the world the concept of the Kavanot in a very practical aspect. So the Rashash says as follows in his Sefer now Shalom, Ki Pesach v'yamim elu. You should know something, says the Holy Rashash. He says what? That on Pesach and these days, Yemei Sefirat HaOmer, the days of Sefirat HaOmer, when we come to Omer, Heim Shoresh L'chol Yemot HaShana. These are the roots for all the days of the year. The roots, you know, for example, if you take a seed and you plant the seed into the ground, and then slowly but surely you get the roots of the tree. Now, the roots are the very existence of the basis of what the tree is. Without the roots, there's nothing. So the roots begin to form, and slowly, before you know it, suddenly you've got a trunk of the tree, and you've got branches, and you've got fruits, and you've got leaves, and all sorts of things come from these roots. The roots are the basis of everything. The Rashash teaches what? That the basis for all the days of the year are included in the days of Sefirat HaOmer. When we get our very being right, when we work on ourselves correctly during the days of Sefirat HaOmer, that stands us in good standing for the entire year. There are always certain days that if we work on it correctly as we should to appreciate the value of that day, then the value of the day gives us the energy to do things better at other days, on other days. For example, if you try to observe Shabbat on Monday, it's very nice if you try to do it, but it's useless because the holiness of Shabbat, which brings us into the next week, can only be had when we are on Shabbat. On Shabbat, no melacha. On Shabbat, sanctity, holiness, making sure we're davening, making sure we're with the family, making sure we're eating good meals, besimcha, wine and challah and meat. We're having a great time physically and spiritually in order to sanctify and prepare ourselves with this holiness that we take into the rest of the week. Now, if you try and do that on Monday, it won't work. I'm sorry, it just won't work. You can try and bring that holiness in and try and create the same types of scene, try and eat that meal, the cholent, and try and drink the wine. It just doesn't have the same feeling. And therefore, if you try to acquire the holiness of Shabbat on Monday, you will not be able to bring that holiness in to the rest of the year. Shabbat is the day of holiness. Take it, use it for holiness, do extra Torah study, because you cannot compare the Torah that is studied on Shabbat to the rest of the week. Impossible. And therefore, take what you can learn there and bring it into the rest of the week, because the day of Shabbat is made for holiness and purity. So too, the Rashash is teaching us that the days of the Omer are the days that prepare us for the rest of the year. How we treat the days of the Omer, how we work on ourselves, not just counting the Omer, not just today is the first day of the Omer, today is the second day, and of course you must do that. Of course that's the mitzvah. But there's a deeper side to Sefirat HaOmer, which we're discussing, and it's the point of these shiurim, is to get to the bottom of how do I work on myself and take the holiness of these days so that it will have an effect on me during the year itself. Ubederek sheholek bahem, says the Rashash, in the way that a person goes in these days, ba molichim oto kol yemot hashana. That is how heaven above will allow him and direct him throughout the entire year. The way that we behave on certain occasions is an opening for Shamayim, for heaven, to awaken us to be better, or the opposite, of course, depending on which days we're choosing to do certain things. And when we do it, we're opening the doors for that particular thing. We're speaking now about good things. So therefore, if I bring sanctity into Shabbat, I bring the sanctity of Shabbat into the week. If I bring sanctity of Sefirat HaOmer, the days of the Omer, as it should be, I take those midot that I work on. I take those attributes and emotions that I'm working on, and it becomes a part of me for the rest of the year, says the Rashash. Okay. And here he brings a quote from the great Gerer Rebbe, known as the Sfat Emet, who said the following: Lachein, therefore, a person must cleave to Hashem, may he be blessed, on these days. And they are days as preparation for the rest of the year. The Sfat Emes, that great Hasidic Rebbe, teaches also that a person needs to cleave to Hashem. Or what does it mean to cleave to Hashem? How do I cleave to Hashem? I know how to cleave to something physical. There is a pole. I hold the pole and I'm cleaving to the pole. But where is Hashem? I have the clouds in the background here, heaven, and all looks very beautiful, but I don't really see Hashem. There's no physicality. Well, of course not. How are we going to cleave to Hashem? We're going to cleave to Hashem by cleaving to his midot, to his attributes, so to speak, to the Sefirot that he has created as tools to work in this world. And when we copy those positive midot that Hashem uses in creation, then we cleave to him. Of course, in a relationship, there are times when opposites also exist. But for the most part, a successful relationship between two people, they could be friends or they could be husband and wife, will work best when the couple are close to each other. Well, I don't mean, of course, close physically. I mean, physically, of course, this can be a close relationship. But I'm not talking about that. We're talking about the aspect of when our minds meet, when we think the same, when we seem to feel that life should be this way together. When we're thinking in the same way, we're growing in the same way, we cleave to each other. And in fact, even if we are 1,000 miles apart, 5,000 miles apart, it makes no difference. We will still cleave to each other because the way that we think is always the same way. That is why we are able to cleave to each other. That is why we are able to be close to each other. Friends share that bond of friendship because they think alike. Friends share certain value systems and they support them. They support themselves, each to the other, in the particular system that they see that they're connecting with. And so therefore, for example, if my custom is that I enjoy giving charity, you'll probably find that I'll do very well amongst people who also give charity because we think the same way. And when there's a campaign and people say, are you going to be giving? I'm talking to my friend who's a great donor. I say, well, what's the story? He says, of course I'm giving. What am I giving? $1 million, he says. Fantastic. I say, you know what? Well, I don't have $1 million, but I'm going to give what I can. Fantastic, he says. We get along well with each other. Or for example, I have a kosher diet and he has a kosher diet. We get along well with each other because we can talk the same language. Not to say that the person who doesn't have a kosher diet can't get along with the one who does have a kosher diet. But the idea is that when one has like-minded values and systems in life, one is more liable to be close to the other. That is the aspect of cleaving. And therefore, when I want to cleave to Hashem, I do it by cleaving to his Torah, which gives me the attributes to work on. I see the quality of who God is by following his directives, through seeing what he himself does in existence, and through that I cleave to him. Another way I can cleave to him is to cleave to other Torah scholars. Because when I cleave to other Torah scholars who are also keeping the ways of Hashem, then I am in turn cleaving to Hashem. This is what it means to be davuk, cleaving to Hashem. We have these stories. The Baal Shem Tov was once meditating, and he went off into a great state of dveikus, of cleaving to Hashem. And you think to yourself, well, that sounds neat. I'll try it myself. You close your eyes and you're trying to be davuk. You're trying to cleave to Hashem. Doesn't seem like anything's happening. Well, what's going on? The difference between the average person who's trying that and the Baal Shem Tov, who disappears from existence as he cleaves in great ecstatic excitement with Hashem, the reason that he's doing that is because he's overwhelmed, because he understands, or at least he understands better than most of us, the greatness of Hashem. And he begins to fall in love with this greatness of Hashem. If it's kashrut, if it's Shabbat, if it's the laws of family purity, if it's charity, if it's Sukkot or Shmini Atzeret, it doesn't make any difference. Waving a lulav and an esrog can bring a person as close to Hashem as saying the Kriyat Shema, as can bring a person close to Hashem as eating a kosher meal and saying a bracha the correct way, or doing a kindness for another person. That great excitement of giving the other person a coin of charity can bring a person to that state of dveikus, just like a person involved in the deepest levels of prayer and meditation. Because it's all the same. God is all the same. As long as we're fulfilling the Torah and following its directives, we are cleaving to Hashem. Oh, so this makes sense. These are days to cleave to Hashem. And the days of Sefirat HaOmer are days to prepare for the whole year. Shabbat prepares us for the next 6 days until the next Shabbat. We need the energy. We need to bring in energy for the next week. And of course, when the next week gets to Wednesday, we start thinking of bringing the energy into Shabbat this week. And so the cycle continues. Okay. Likewise. But even in these generations, which is after Yetziat Mitzrayim, the exodus of Egypt, that the Jewish people followed after Hashem in the desert. That's what they did. They followed after Hashem in the desert. They were freed from the exile of Egypt, and when they were freed, they went into the desert. I remember for you the kindness of your youth, meaning then that we cleave to Hashem. When we left Eretz Mitzrayim, we cleave to Hashem as we went through the desert. And certainly, from this there remains a memory in heaven for all generations. The same things that happened then are the same things that are happening now. Ma'aseh avot siman labanim. That happened to the forefathers is exactly what happens to us today also. It's all the same story. Pesach of today is the same Pesach that was celebrated at that point in time, 3,000 years ago. Because the idea is that happened then is an expression of what happens constantly at the same time of the year, every single year that comes around at that point in time. So Shabbos, of course, Shabbos 7 days, and every 7 days is a representation, is the essence of what the original Shabbos was. It's not just a representation as if I'm trying to remember what it was. The force of spirituality that was inherent on that 7th day, we are able to lock into on every Shabbos. The force that was present when the Jewish people left Eretz Mitzrayim during Pesach time, they left, that same spiritual force can be tapped into today also. And so therefore, what we're celebrating today is really just exactly the same thing that was celebrated then. We need to tune into it. We need to connect with it. We need to be davuk. We need to do cleaving. So he says over here, Mimela, automatically, Yeshis ororus b'neshamas b'nei Yisrael, there is an awakening from the souls of the Jewish people. Lehispater le'lav yisbarach b'yamim elu, to nullify ourselves during these days. Lachen kasuf, and therefore it's written, U'Sefartem Lachem, you shall count for yourselves. Ki hazman mukshar ata lekach, because it is the time that is perfect to prepare now for what it is that we're doing. In other words, don't count Sefirat HaOmer between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Well, a little bit longer. You know, don't do the days over there for Sefirat HaOmer. Why? Because the days of Elul to Rosh Hashanah, sorry, I said Elul to Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur is not the same as the days of Sefirat HaOmer when it occurs at the time that it occurs. We need to tap into the energy, the spiritual power that exists now as it existed then. When is that? Sefirat HaOmer. Just like it existed then, so too the same power exists today. U'Sefartem Lachem. That's why you're counting, says the Torah, says the Sfas Emes. Od kasav b'seif Sfas Emes. He also gives another quote. B'zeh alashon. Mi sheshomer Sefirat HaOmer. Listen to this beautiful quote. He says, somebody who guards the counting of the Omer, v'kaka Shavuot, and then he does Shavuot, karaoi, as he should do, fittingly. Ein tzarich lavor b'mishpat b'rosh Hashanah. You might remember that I said this expression already in the first Shear, if I'm not mistaken. And this is the quote from the Sfas Emes, the Ger Rebbe. What did he say? He said, a person who fulfills these days as he should the right way, ein tzarich lavor b'mishpat b'rosh Hashanah. He does not have to come for the day of judgment on Rosh Hashanah. Ein b'Zohar, and he brings down here what the Zohar says, and we're going to take a look at what the Zohar says about this idea of how it is that one who observes the days of Sefirat HaOmer as he should, he needn't fear the judgment day of Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because when a person, of course, just outside, before we read inside, let's discuss it, when a person is engaged in the teshuvah process all the time, he's developing himself, he doesn't have to fear the day of judgment when it arrives, and he's completely unprepared. Of course, the Elul exists, and we prepare ourselves for Rosh Hashanah in Elul. But he gives a deeper insight. He says that these days of Sefirat HaOmer are the days that really tune us in to what the spirituality is, that makes us so prepared for Rosh Hashanah. Don't worry about what Rosh Hashanah is. You are well prepared, he says. Let's take a look at the Zohar here. He says, this is quoting from the Zohar in Tetzaveh, and it's chapter 9 over here. The page is supposed to be Kuf Pei Gimel Amud Beis. Doesn't say it over here. Okay, let's take a look. You see the translation is on the left if you would be interested in reading it. Don't forget the Zohar written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is written in Aramaic. There is an English translation here on Sefaria, but not throughout the entire Zohar. So we're going through it as best as we can. And where necessary, I'll look at some interpretation over here if I need to do so. B'yom Rosh Hashanah, on the day of Rosh Hashanah, the Ihu Yom Dedina, and this is the day of judgment. The Bechol Yom Delav Ihu. Now, on every day, it's not ella le'inon delo natlu mechla de asvasa. All other days is not ella except le'inon. In other words, this day of Rosh Hashanah is only for those people delo natlu mechla de asvata, who did not eat the food of healing. Or anybody who doesn't eat the food of healing, which is called matzah. Matzah has two names to it, which is meikla dasvata and meikla the emunasa, the food of faith and the food of healing. So it's the meikla the emunasa, the food of, if I said it right, maybe I said it wrong. Meikla dasvasa, so it's the food of healing and the food of faith. Fine. So anyway, it's still the food of healing. V'shavku la'asvasa d'oraisa, and they leave also the food of the Torah. Begin meikla achara de'ihu chometz, and these people during the year who did not eat the food of, sorry, the meikla de'hemenusa, the food, that's what I'm thinking of. Meikla de'hemenusa, the food of faith and the food of healing. When we eat matzah, we bring within ourselves the concept of faith, that gives us the ability to trust in Hashem. And when we eat the matzah, it is also food of healing, both on the physical and the spiritual level. And those people who say they didn't enjoy the matzah and they feel sick and all sorts of things, but rest assured, the Torah tells us that the matzah itself brings healing to the physical body, and it certainly brings healing to the spiritual soul. So these people do not engage in the eating of the matzah when they should, in other words. I'm not talking about the rest of the year. That's what we discussed before. It's no good counting Sefirat HaOmer between Elul and Yom Kippur. It doesn't help. It's no good fasting Yom Kippur on Purim. That doesn't help either. So you say, but it helps to fast. So I'm going to fast Yom Kippur on Purim. No. You fast Yom Kippur on Yom Kippur because the energy of Yom Kippur is Yom Kippur. If it's Pesach, please don't have the Seder on Erev Pesach. The time to have the Seder is on Pesach itself. That doesn't accomplish anything if you do the Seder in the wrong time. So to here, if you eat matzah during the year, for example, on Sukkot, you eat matzah, and good for you for eating the matzah. But the effect of the matzah on Sukkot is not the same as the effect of the matzah on Pesach itself. Now, those people who do not engage in eating matzah as they should, well, they think to themselves, it's Pesach, but that was old stuff. Today we eat burgers. We have whatever they say, God forbid. We're eating a lovely sandwich to enjoy ourselves on Pesach. That's the old days that they used to eat this matzah. We're modern today. We don't eat matzah. Well, a person who does this, he says, they leave behind the healing of the Torah, begin meikla achara, and they leave it for the sake of another type of food, the chometz, which is the chometz, which means the bread. Then this day of Rosh Hashanah, hahu chometz salka, this chometz goes up, and it starts to affect accusations on a person. The Al-Shina Lane speaks badly about the person. Yes, everything in creation is talking about us. You don't think so? Well, just think about this for a second. Many times you're in conversation with friends, family, and you think everything's going well. But I tell you, you turn your back, and the next thing you know, you hear a rumor about yourself, and you say, well, where did that come from? Well, it must have come from somebody who said something. You said, people don't say anything. Why would somebody say such a thing about me? But people speak behind one's back, and they say negativity. They say negative things. They say things that are untrue. People believe the rumors. And one day the person turns around and he says, where did that come from? I never did it. That wasn't me. Or they misunderstood the situation. They didn't know what I was doing. They thought I wasn't doing that at all. They thought I was doing, no, I was doing something else altogether. But they didn't ask. They rather made an assumption in their minds and they began to speak. Everything in creation is talking about us all the time. People are talking about us, and all the birds of the heavens and all the animals that we interact with and the trees and everything around us is also talking about us. The walls talk about us. The walls know what we're up to, and even they send messages to the universe. Now, the Zohar tells us this. It says this chometz that's been eaten goes up to Shamayim and accuses us and speaks badly about us. And then it stands on this day of Rosh Hashanah. Yes, the chometz that we ate, the person who ate it, of course, on Pesach, it goes up and accuses the whole world. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu sits on the whole world and he judges the world. In other words, those people who are involved in the exercise of eating chometz and not taking the healing of the Torah and taking the healing of the matzah, as the Zohar points out, it's the healing of the matzah, michle de asvasa, the food of healing. When we don't eat it, the chometz makes accusations against us. We don't even realize it. Oh, no such thing. Chometz would never say such a thing about me. Yes, and family members would probably never say things about you too. And suddenly the person might hear such a rumor and say, where did it come from? It could only have come from this person who saw me, who spoke about me that way once, who heard me say such a thing, and I would never suspect it. So too over here. The chometz is speaking about us like everything else in creation, always speaking. And when we die, the same thing happens to us once again. All the forces of creation come to speak on our behalf and say, this is what you did. This is who you are. This is what we saw. Everything is involved in the creation and in the judgment. And therefore, a person who is careful on Pesach from eating chometz, it will help him that he will be guarded the entire year. And all the more so now on Rosh Hashanah, he'll be saved from the kitrug, from the accusing force that is holding him liable because he would have eaten the chometz. But now that he ate the matzah, he stands the chance that nothing can accuse him because he's had the matzah. Oh, so from this point of view, we see that the person who behaved correctly on Pesach will be saved from the din of Rosh Hashanah. But the person who doesn't behave correctly on Pesach and he eats the hummus and he doesn't take the michla das vasa, he doesn't take the michla de oraisa, he doesn't take the food of the Torah, the healing of the Torah, the healing that comes in the matzah, then all the things that he's involved in negatively go up on Rosh Hashanah, and this produces this accusing force. And when we think about these things, we'll find that the good luck charm, let's call it the segula, the treasure, the good luck charm of the days of the Omer, is in for the sole purpose of removing the evil inclination. As it explains the things over there in the Zohar, and it says over there, just want to see if yes, here we have the other Zohar available. And what does the Zohar say? It says the following. Let's read inside. Pikuda batada. This commandment is as follows. Lemebad chag Shavuot, to do Shavuot. Tiksiv, as it says, V'asisa chag Shavuot la'Hashem Elokecha, and you shall make the Shavuot day for Hashem your God. Shavuot, why? Al da'alu Yisrael l'razat ha'chamshin yomin. Because the Jewish people arise, they enter into the secret of the 50 days. The Inun Shiva Shavuot, which are the 7 weeks. Or the Korbanat Omer, and when they offer the Korban of the Omer, it betel Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is nullified. The Arkat Me'eshes Chayil, and it flees away from the Eshet Chayil, from the woman of Vela. V'chad Taman lo et kriv, and they don't offer it midbak, and v'chad Taman lo et kriv, and there, and over there, if they don't offer, if it's not offered, mistabkin Yisrael b'kudshe brichu. Now, I'm not sure what happened. Korban omi patel Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is nullified. Sheboreach me'eshet chayil ukishisham lo nikrav. Oh, and there it's not offered, meaning it's not offered for the evil. It's offered on the side of the good. Misbat kin Yisrael b'kudshe brichu. And the Jewish people cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'isbetal me'ela umitata. And it nullifies everything from above and from below. Ubegin kach, and because of this, Ikrei begavnada atzeret. That's why it is called atzeret. What does atzeret mean? To stop. The ispe bittul Yetzer Hara. This is the nullification of the evil inclination. V'alda lo kesiv bechatas. And we see over there, with regards to the day of Shavuot, that we don't offer a chatas offering. It doesn't say chatas. Kishar zmanim, like on other days. Diksiv b'hu chatas l'Hashem. There it says you offer it as a chatas offering. And then all the lights enter in to the woman of Vela, or begin kakatzeret, and that is why it is called atzeret. So what does this mean exactly so far? It means, let's continue one step further. Let's just see as it goes on further. Okay, I'm just going to read here from what he says here because I've lost the flow of the direction, but I'll come back to it in a second. It says, so we're going to nullify the evil inclination. V'alda, and on this, v'al Shavuot, mitbatlinu borkim ha'kitzaynim min ha'kedusha. All the evil external forces flee from the holiness. And that's why it doesn't mention like the other days. That's why it says over there, for example, on Shavuot, that there is the Seir Yizim, there's the goat, which is offered to atone for one. And there it doesn't say for a chatas offering, like they say on the other musaf offerings for the festive days. The ksiv behu chatas, there it says chatas, shekasuv bahem seir izim echad lechatas. There it says it. Levi shekulam notnim chelek lachitzonim, because everything gives a portion to the external forces. Dugma seir amishtaleyach. Oh, that was the point I wanted to get to. This is a comparison to the goat of Azazel that was thrown off the cliff at the time of Yom Kippur. We know that the Kohen Gadol has to offer one animal, and the other animal is taken to a cliff and it is thrown off the cliff. Why is it thrown off the cliff? אבל כאן בחג שבועות, לפי שמתבטלת אחיזת החיצונים, since on Shavuot we nullify the hold of all of these external forces of impurity, אין צריכים לשאת להם חלק. You don't need to give them a portion at all. I'll explain exactly what he's talking about. וכדין כל נהורים יתכנסו לאש ישראל, ואז כל האורס מתקבצים, and then all of the lights enter El Eish Israel Shehi Hashkina. They enter into the Eish Israel, which is the Shkina. What is he talking about? He's talking about the following. There are two forces in creation, forces of good and forces of evil. And God created both forces to receive some sort of nourishment in this world equally. He does not deprive any creature from its particular requirement. For example, there are things called dung beetles. Well, everybody knows what the dung beetle is up to. What is the food of the dung beetle? Everybody knows what the dung beetle eats. Well, for the dung beetle, dung beetles eat dung, and that's all right for the dung beetle. It's very happy eating it. But if a person is a healthy human being, it's not normal that he's going to go finding all the dung and rolling it into little balls and then eating it afterwards. It's unusual. It's a little bit sickening. But yet the dung beetle is very happy. Yes, indeed. God has created all sorts of creatures in the world. And some creatures eat this, and some creatures eat that. And God doesn't deny any creature the food that God has created for that particular creature to eat. God has created forces in creation that are evil forces, and for whatever reason, he gives the evil force its nourishment. On Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, when all sorts of holy procedures are being done to grant spirituality and holiness into the world, the forces of evil say, "Where is my share, God?" And God says, "I will give you your share." And the Kohen Gadol puts all the aveiros of the Jewish people onto the heads of the Seir HaMishtaleach, of the goat that's going to be sent into Azazel over the rock. Everything is put spiritually onto this head. And then when the animal is sent over the rock, it is as if all the spiritual forces of negativity are being handed over to the forces of evil to get their nourishment. What do they get their nourishment from? From evil. So therefore they get the negative force of this particular goat, and the Jewish people get all of the positive force of spirituality. This is the concept of the chatas offering. And the chatas offering, we say, there's no mention made of it whatsoever on Shavuot. Why is that? Because the reason is, everything is given. Everything is given to the forces of evil. Since we do away completely from all negative forces, we give them no portion. Why do the forces of evil get no portion? Because we nullify all the forces of evil. This is where we began our discussion. We're talking about Ma'alas Ukedushas Yemei HaOmer. We're speaking about the level, the greatness, and the holiness of the days of the Omer. What makes these days so great is that we engage in a process of purification. When we engage correctly, and we work on ourselves correctly, and we develop ourselves, we become greater, and we cut off the negativity, then when we approach Shavuot, there is nothing to give to the forces of evil, because the forces of evil have already been nullified out of existence. They are not on the same level as Yom Kippur, that the forces of evil need their nourishment. Where does the nourishment come from? All the sins. So the sins are placed on this particular goat, and the goat is thrown off as if we give it to the negative forces, and the negative forces are all of a sudden happy. They have their dung, so to speak, like the dung beetle. And therefore, our duty is, of course, to purify ourselves and to work on ourselves. Again, this is just the introduction into the lead up of how we are going to work on ourselves. So I hope that you are gaining from this idea, I feel it's so necessary before we actually engage in the avodah, is to lead up to appreciating what the avodah is actually doing. We understand the hidden idea of what the Sefirat HaOmer is. We know where we're coming from. We know where we're going to. And as we work on ourselves, it becomes an exciting adventure because we know that we are developing ourselves correctly to prepare for Shavuot, a day of complete purity and holiness when we receive the Torah, which takes us through our entire lives. This brings us to the end of this lesson, and the next shiur, what we're going to be speaking about, Bezrat Hashem, Bli Neder, if we get there, is the concept of Yemei HaOmer, Yemei Nisayon, that the days of the Omer are days of trial. They are trying days. So even though we get excited about it and we're going to really want to work on ourselves, we're going to find an amazing thing happens to us. We're going to get lazy and we're going to feel like we don't really know what to do and we don't really want to do. And the task, of course, is to realize that the not wanting to do is part of the trial of actually improving ourselves, of actually becoming great. We become great because of the trial. We do not become great because we are great. We become great because the trial is present. We work on ourselves, we develop ourselves, and that brings us to that level of greatness that we're striving for. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope that you will join me in the next lesson. As I say, each lesson draws even further into the discussion and becomes more and more exciting as we get involved in more and more hidden sources until eventually we're going to see exactly how to work on ourselves on each day of the Sefirat HaOmer. Thanks very much for joining me. I'm Eliyahu Shear from Chesed Ve'emet in Yerushalayim, my website www.lovingkindness.co. If you've gained something from this lesson, enjoyed it, even if it's just the flow of the shiur or it's the quotes that we've been learning, please do give the shiur a thumbs up by clicking on the button below the video. Please do subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Click on the bell button to be notified of future shiurim. Please feel free to comment in the comment section if you've enjoyed it and let me know your thoughts about it, questions that you might have, insights that you might have, positive things that show that you're enjoying the shiur and you're gaining from the shiur itself. Please do share the shiur with friends and family so that my channel can become better known to other people. I really do appreciate it. And of course, if you'd like to come on board and support our activities, well, that would be a great win for us. We do need your help, and we certainly do appreciate all the help from those who give it to us. You really do make a difference in our lives and allow us to produce more of these videos. Thank you very much for all of that. Don't forget, if you'd like to learn with me one-on-one, please feel free to contact me via my website. We can learn some Torah together, a book of your choice. We do it at your pace, and it's a lot of fun, and we really gain from it. We both stand to gain from it, so please join me. If you're looking for spiritual counseling, Torah counseling in a way of guidance in life, of a path to take, and you feel that you're a little bit trapped and you need some growth and you're not quite sure direction to take, I don't offer any psychology sessions as such, but I do offer online Torah spiritual counseling in which we discuss things from a Torah point of view. We look at the Torah and we say, what is the Torah teaching us under these circumstances, and what is best for you in your circumstances to grow to become the person that is the best person for you to grow into. Thank you very much for the shiur. I look forward to the next shiur. I wish you everything of the best. Take care. Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.